Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to today's topic for our 2021 Professional Development Week. What does an inclusive teacher do? We're happy to have a panel discussion and introduce you to some videos of our other panelists that couldn't be here today. But my name is Kelly Williamson. I'm the community manager of the SUNY CPD located in Syracuse. If you haven't been to our offices or if you have in recent years, just note that we have moved, but we're still at the same location and we're now experimenting with hybrid events. So if you have a burning question about that, feel free to reach out to me. I wanted to welcome my colleague Chris Price here from SUNY CPD, as well as Stephanie and David, who are joining us live. We thank you for taking this opportunity to participate with us, and we look forward to having a great discussion. So I want to keep this quick so we can actually go get started with the conversation. So I just have some housekeeping slides, Chris. It's really about, so what we're doing here, right? We're just highlighting the awareness that we should be investing in ourselves, not only as a professional, but as a person and as a leader. So the CPD has been doing this week for a couple of years. We're really excited to be able to pull it together this year, still in pandemic phase. Last year we had a shortened week, but we've been really happy with our turnout, and thank you for paying attention to us and finding us through all the noise and the clutter of the past couple of years. And if you have a topic, especially around diversity initiatives or something else in that field or connected to teaching in any way, please feel free to let us know so we can add it to our list of topics. Next slide. So you're all muted, and by now we're probably all Zoom pros, right? So please drop any questions in the chat. I will be monitoring it. I will also be following along and sharing any links to the resources that are mentioned. You will receive this recording as well as the slide presentation separately, and it'll also be posted as a recording to our YouTube playlist. Next slide. And I think that's pretty much it. I don't think I have any other slides, Chris. Just be aware you're being recorded. You did consent to that. And if you have a conversation that you want to take offline with some of the presenters, I will also put their email addresses in the chat because we are sharing this out. So if you want to have a more private conversation about a topic, we welcome that. So take it away. I don't know, Chris, if I have any other ones. I can't remember what I had in my slide deck. Oh yeah, this is it. So I think I'm just going to turn over to Chris, and you can have our panelists introduce themselves.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. So as she kind of mentioned, I'm Chris Price. I'm the Academic Programs Manager for the SUNY Center for Professional Development. Part of what I do for my job is oversee a number of certificate programs, professional development programs for faculty and staff. And the folks that you'll be hearing from today teach for our SUNY Diversity, Equity and Inclusion and Teaching Learning Certificate Program. The program is going into, it's just in its third year now. And I'm going to talk about the program first, but then I'm going to turn it over to the instructors. And I'm just going to let the two instructors who joined us here live introduce themselves just before they talk. And we have two other instructors who are able to record a short videos talking about their courses. And then we have two instructors who are unable to make it today, who I'm going to talk about. So in the chat, I'd like you just to kind of, if you could, introduce yourself, your name, your campus, and then just share what you'd like to learn about inclusive teaching in this session. And what we'll do is I'll look that over as the others are presenting. And when we get to the Q&A time at the end, we'll make sure we addressed what you'd like to learn in this session. But it would also be good to know who's here. So if you could just do that now in the chat, go ahead. As you do that, here's the registration page for the program. We have a very easy URL to remember to get to this page. It's suny.edu/DEI cert. So Kelly said she'd put some of those in the chat for me. So Kelly, if you could do that. And again, if you're just joining us, I'm looking for your name, your email, and what you'd like to learn in the session about inclusive teaching. So this is our program page. It tells you the purpose of the program. It's to help faculty, and not just faculty. So we've had librarians and others who are in sort of non-faculty but teaching roles. So some folks in student affairs taken our program. And the idea is to develop new mindsets and strategies for more inclusive and equitable practices in classrooms and other learning environments. So, maybe if you're an instructional designer or a faculty developer and you're leading workshops or other courses, it's also a program that you might benefit from. And, the idea is that it's competency-based. So when we developed this program in partnership with a number of DEI and faculty professional development folks in SUNY, we went through and we kind of thought about what would people need to know and be able to do to have an inclusive mindset in a learning environment. And we brainstormed those, we put those together, and on the website, I don't have it listed here, you could see that list of competencies. But essentially what we did was we put those competencies together and created 4 learning objectives for the program right now. So those who complete the program should be able to do the following. First off, critically reflect about how their own identity and background shapes their teaching practice, and then take this into account when designing and teaching their courses. I mean, one of the things that became very clear when we were putting this program together is that who you are as a teacher, what your background is, what your ethnicity is, how you identify gender-wise, or all these sort of things that make up who we are, goes a long way towards determining how we teach. And so having that sort of self-understanding is the first step in being more inclusive. Second, this idea of communicating effectively is super important, and that's true of all teaching. But when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, you have to be able to participate in conversations with students and your colleagues about how race, class, ethnicity, gender, and all other identity constructs will impact learning environments. So you have to be prepared to enter into those conversations. And then the second 2 learning objectives is that are related to creating accessible and welcoming learning environments that are supportive, inclusive, and then take into account, the diversity of students you'll find in your classrooms. And, one of the things that's always remarkable at teaching is that you could teach the same course for years and years and years, but every semester your students are different. The mix of your students is different, their backgrounds are different. And so you always you can't just assume that you're going to have this same group of students every semester, right? So you have to make sure that your learning environment is accessible and welcoming. And I'm glad Dave's here to talk live, because he'll talk about universal design for learning and including students with disabilities in your courses. And then the final learning objective for the program is that you have to implement teaching and learning practices that are known to create more equitable achievement and engagement among diverse populations of students, and especially those who are underrepresented in particular fields and disciplines. So we know that students kind of sometimes self-select into different courses, into different programs, and so certain students are definitely unrepresented in some programs versus others, and so you should be knowledgeable about those patterns as a professor in a discipline in a department. You should kind of know what you might need to do to encourage those students who are unrepresented, and strategies that you can take to maybe address that in your courses. And so that's the 4th learning objective. So, so that's the kind of overarching, what the program is all about. And to do that, we have all these courses here. And there are 6 courses. 1 is required. We offer that course twice a year. And the others are, we call them electives, but they're just, other courses that kind of, help you to explore a specific dimension of diversity, equity, inclusion in the classroom and in designing courses. The critically reflecting course on diversity in teaching, taught by Dr. Sim Covington, is required because, again, as I said earlier, that idea of being critically reflective, understanding who you are and what you need to know is super important to being an inclusive teacher. And so I'm sure Stephanie will talk a little bit about her overview of what inclusive teaching is. And so we have that course required. Dr. Covington requires his students in that class to do an assessment of their institution and focus in on a particular DEI initiative you'd like to see your institution undertake. I get to see a lot of these because we require folks who complete the program to do a portfolio, and that's the one thing that we require from that course in the portfolio. The other course that's not represented in the presentation today is our Ernest from SUNY ESF. So Dr. Nakansa Duamina teaches the Helping Non-Traditional Students Succeed course. That actually starts on January 4th, and I know that there's some open spots for that if you're interested. And as we know, non-traditional students, it seems like these days, though, it's hard to sort of say what student is non-traditional. The sort of typical 18 to 23-year-old is not always the population of many courses that we teach. In particular, like I teach Introduction to Liberal Studies for SUNY Brockport, and I would say the quote-unquote traditional student is probably, not a majority of the students in my class. But again, we have to recognize that students who are not in that 18 to 22 range coming into college right after high school do have particular needs that need to be addressed. And so Ernest does a good job of that in his course. And then you see the other 4 courses, again, they'll all be represented today, either through a video or the presenters here live, talking about their course, Teaching for Racial Equity, and that's Malmberg, Designing and Delivering Inclusive Courses, Renee and Gena from MCC, and then Dave, who's here live to talk about Universal Design for Learning. And then finally, we wrap up with Eileen MacAvery Kane from SUNY Rockland, who has a course that she teaches in the summer about engaging strategies, innovative strategies to engage all students, so in particular using technology to talk about that.
Hey, Chris, just wanted to interrupt. On the screen, there seems to be some dark blocks that are kind of like moving on your screen. So I wasn't sure.
That's just that's the video screen.
Okay,
so
just making sure. I'll just let everyone know whenever you're sure you'll have a clean set of slides.
All right, yeah, that's just the video screen. I don't know why Zoom does that.
Okay, sounds great.
All
Just
right.
want to make sure.
Yeah, all right. You think they would have figured that out by now when people are sharing their screen, that those wouldn't happen. All right, so as I said before, here's the website address for the program, and you can go there, register now. All right, so if you're just joining us, we're about to get started with our panelists. If you could put in your in the chat, if you haven't done so yet, your name, your campus, and then what you'd like to learn about inclusive teaching in the session. That'll be helpful. Make sure we address this at the end when we have Q&A. So I've reduced everything, so there shouldn't be any more blocks on the screen. And I'm going to turn it over now to Stephanie, who's going to, again, Stephanie teaches our Teaching for Racial Equity course, but I think Stephanie's going to talk a little bit more broadly about, teaching inclusive teaching. So Stephanie, take it away.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for being here today. As Chris indicated, my name is Stephanie Malmberg, and I am the Assistant Dean of Distance Learning and Professional Development at SUNY Broome. I also teach in the Department of Human Development at Binghamton University and in the CPD's DEI certificate program, where, as Chris mentioned, I teach a course called Teaching for Racial Equity. I'm going to talk to you a bit today about that course, specifically toward the end of my presentation. The bulk of what I'll be talking about today synthesizes my teaching experience at undergraduate levels, both at community colleges and D1 research institutions, as well as the scholarship that I've engaged in. I want to say I was actually, in preparing for this today, this has been I've been working on one variation or another of this since 2013. So the first thing I want to do is I want to talk about what inclusive teaching is and how to create those conditions. And so inclusive teaching builds upon an instructor's basic instinct to ensure that all voices are heard and that all students have a chance to participate fully in the learning process. This is done a couple of different ways. I think one is by digging a little deeper into why imbalances exist related to classroom participation. In particular, inclusive teaching begins by considering a variety of concerns, What do some types of students why do some types of students seem to participate more frequently? How might cultural assumptions influence interactions with students? How might student identities, ideologies, and backgrounds influence their level of engagement? And then I will also talk a bit today about how course and teaching design can encourage full participation and provide accessibility to all types of students. And so can we go back one slide? I'm sorry, I just realized I think I'm thinking more toward the beginning. Thank you. Perfect. So first, I want to say that inclusive teaching is a mindset. We can't just will inclusive classrooms into existence. There's a lot of active prep work, active teaching, and real-time classroom management that is required in order for this type of environment to yield the types of outcomes that we intend and to not cause harm in the process. The classroom environment, regardless of modality, impacts the learning that takes place as much as the content that we teach. And if there's something that I've learned, particularly over the last 18 months, is that the more structure you have, the better. More structure is going to work for most students, and it won't cause harm to those who might not need it. Some of the most traditional and common teaching methods, so things that I know I've done, like lecturing ad nauseum, cold calling in particular, these aren't inclusive strategies, at least is how we commonly do them. So the nature of many of the academic accommodation plans I've received over the last, I would say 3 years, indicate a high level of anxiety among students related to having to produce something in a short amount of time in the classroom environment, right? I call on you, I expect you to say something, there's a tension there. And so I've stopped cold calling completely. And instead I am using small group to large group report outs for complex questions, which I think takes the pressure off of individual students, and it also helps build community in the classroom. For my in-person courses, I'm leveraging the LMS for a lot of things that I don't necessarily need to spend class time on. I also spend a lot of time developing short lecture videos during the pandemic, and I will get as much use out of them as I can. And so while there's some lecturing that still has to happen in my classes, it's really more helping students make the connections among the materials and seeing how they fit together and within the broader framework of what it is that we're studying, as well as how to apply it. And I really do find that that's a better use of our time together. So one of the things I like to think about is who might get left behind as a result of a low structure course meeting. And so for me, I have everything in the LMS, and the LMS is incredibly organized and accessible. There are SUNY tools like Oscar that can help with the structure of the learning environment. And we also have Blackboard Ally on our campuses, which helps with the accessibility of course content. Beyond that, providing students with a structure as to what to expect, guiding questions that we connect to and reflect upon at the end of the course meeting, connecting what we're covering to the learning outcomes of the course. All of this adds additional structure to the learning experience. And when talking about experiences and culture and other sensitive topics, I really have to be on. So I am stewarding these conversations so that they're productive and not causing harm to any of my students. And this involves a lot of structure. A book that I am reading with faculty on our campus right now this semester is called Matthew K's Not Light But Fire, How to Lead Meaningful Race Conversations in the Classroom. And while this particular book is about race conversations, it's also a solid inclusive pedagogy book. It's geared toward K through 12 educators, but we have found that there are a lot of takeaways that the faculty discussion group and I have been able to immediately apply in structuring our teaching environments. Next slide. Thank you so much. So some of the things that happen when you are teaching in a way that it might be different than the experiences that your students have had other places, other classrooms. So there can be a lot of silence. And at first I was really afraid of the silence, to be quite honest with you. But over time, I've really learned to sit with that. And I've also learned that it can be a really good thing. It usually means that students are thinking. It's okay to say, let's circle back to this. Let's get into our small groups and maybe think it through there and then come back to the large group. Silence, you know, it's very unnerving. It can be very destabilizing as an instructor, but embracing it will help create the environment that you're looking to support. I'm also adding a lot of structure to small group discussions. So typically I pre-develop a list of questions because I want the conversation that they have in the small group to be productive. But I always add a last question, which is, you know, what burning questions might you still have after reading whatever we're reading, or after we watch this video or this particular lecture, or even a class discussion. And so this gives students an opportunity to think critically about the course material and inform an aspect of the discussion. I do allow for anonymous participation in person. That's a lot easier because we can just download an app, or we can do a Kahoot or something like that, you know, use the technological tools we have access to. In the LMS, it's a little harder. In online teaching, you know, I haven't quite figured out what that would look like for my courses yet. Sometimes students bring in perceptions of themselves that you know, might suggest that they're not capable of having these types of conversations, or they aren't sure of how to say something. Another thing that I've experienced quite a bit this semester is students will ask to review their performance on an assignment with the notion of covering what they got wrong, which I absolutely understand. A lot of what I try to impress upon students is, you know, the X percentage that they got right, and really ask them to talk me through the logic as to how they arrived at their accurate answers. And so often this opportunity to talk it through helps them understand what they got wrong and how they might have approached that differently. Another idea that a colleague shared with me yesterday, literally over coffee, is grading for equity. And there are a few practices related to that I was able to recognize that I already do in my own practice, but I'm really excited to look into a few others that she introduced me to today. Connecting with students personally, you know, that was a little harder when we were fully online, but where I've been able to really do that in online teaching is in feedback, feedback related to discussion boards. It asks a little bit more of me, but I do participate in every discussion board. Regardless of the modality that I'm teaching in, an icebreaker discussion also goes a long way. I actually use the icebreaker discussion that we in my face-to-face classrooms to inform the small groups that they work in. So I ask them their major, their intended career goal, or at best a general field, and a social justice issue that they're passionate about. And from there, I can sort that in an Excel spreadsheet into groups where they have interests and aspirations that are aligned and can work through course materials through almost a shared lens. And then I'm a Freudian at heart and in practice, and I have as much to learn from my students as they do from me. And so I really amplify their experiences and their meaning making of the materials. And I'll talk a bit about that in the next slide. So this, I realized that it was a tale of two assignments. And then as I was preparing for this, I remembered I had a third, which is really exciting. So one of the things that I think is incredibly important about inclusive teaching is providing students with the opportunity to engage with, unpack, and reflect on the course materials through the lenses of their own experiences. I tell students that I'm assigning materials to them through my own lens, which is limited by my own experiences. And what I'm really interested in is what these concepts look like through the lens of their experiences and their cultural ways of knowing. Students want to be seen. And so I have a few assignments that I use in various courses that are designed to privilege their voices and experience. The first is a cultural immersion project. I haven't been able to use this since the semester before the pandemic, but I'm looking forward to being able to use it again. This assignment asks students to participate in an activity or within the community where they are a racial or ethnic minority. The goal of the assignment is to have a cross-cultural experience and answer a series of questions, the culmination of which, if the experience went well enough, results in a paper that reads like a personal journey for most students. This is difficult for some of our students who've never experienced an environment where they are a minority and may even have trouble thinking about where they might go to have such an experience. I help them with a list of placements that I keep. I have relationships with mosques, Buddhist temples, African-American churches, various affinity groups, and the American Civic Association, to name a few. What I've learned over time is that the timing of this assignment is key. It's usually due on or about week 10, and I ask that their cross-cultural experience be completed during week 7 or 8. At this point, they've read enough articles and participated in class discussions to the point where they have the framework and the tools for a meaningful experience. And there's also a level of trust that's been established between them and I. One of the best impacts of this, aside from providing students with an opportunity to have a meaningful experience and learn something about themselves and others, is the pride they take in their final product. I'll devote class time to discuss the experience and where students went, what they learned, and the feedback and camaraderie in the room is often incredibly positive. The social justice mixtape, I love music, so I really love this assignment. I ask students to use a free music app, Spotify, where they can build a playlist. I ask them to find songs that are meaningful to them through the lens of the course materials. I give them a few examples and share some exemplar assignments, but honestly, students really run with this assignment. The written portion is a paragraph for each song that explains the connection they've made to the course concepts. And again, here, students really enjoy this a lot. They share a lot of music with me that I would not normally know about in many instances. And they share their experiences and often bring a level of vulnerability to this project. And then I added this last one, this newer assignment that I've been using. So the shift to online, I had to think about how I was going to build that inclusive piece, how I was going to get students to engage with the material and then share that back with me. And so I was able to do that through leveraging a somewhat weekly discussion board. It wasn't every week, but it was like 10 out of 15. And question 3 was the same for each and every discussion board, which was to find me a TikTok or a meme or other social media that helps me understand or further complexifies the material that we're covering through their experience or cultural lens. I've seen a lot of TikToks this semester, and I can state that I am now on TikTok, though I've never made a TikTok. This assignment too provides students with an opportunity to be seen and heard for how they see themselves in relation to what it is that we're learning. Next slide, and I think that's my last slide, which is exciting. So what can we do? So there are some things that if you want to start doing more inclusive teaching in your classes, there's some things you want to do to get yourself ready for this as well. You want to learn about issues of social privilege and oppression, including groups whose experiences differ from your own based on race, sexuality, religion, gender, ability status, and other social differences. Many of our campuses have DEI offices, professional development opportunities, and the like. If anyone is looking for a place to get started, the SUNY CPD DEI certificate program is a great place to start. We need to work to become aware of implicit biases and stereotypes and how these may manifest in our teaching. This is a significant emphasis in the Teaching for Racial Equity course. A lot of what we spend our time working on is identifying opportunities to decenter the whiteness that can be pervasive in our classrooms. We go through the what of teaching for racial equity and the why and the how of teaching for racial equity. So at the end, typically you have a revamped or a redesigned or a redeveloped assignment, and that is the final project that takes into consideration a number of moving parts that you've learned throughout the short semester, the short workshop. One size will never fit all. And so, working with faculty, it tends to be a little bit more straightforward, but I'm always happy to hop on a Zoom with somebody who is in the course who might be, working in professional development or who might be on the student affairs side of the house to kind of talk through what might be the best way for them to interpret this assignment. Definitely getting an external perspective is incredibly helpful. The Teaching for Racial Equity course has a weekly discussion post where everybody responds. We all participate and further complexify ideas and understandings of the materials. There's a camaraderie that develops among participants in this course too, and there's a lot of positive and constructive feedback that's shared and provided among course participants. Keeping a journal, this is something I suggest everyone does. I still do it, particularly after a more difficult or contentious or emotional course meeting, which it likely happens at least once a semester. Finding support and connecting with colleagues, so participating in the DEI certificate, as well as the workplace soon-to-be teams channel is a really great way to work with faculty and staff across the system who've had similar experiences. And that is the bulk of what I wanted to talk to you today. I haven't been monitoring the chat, but I can answer any questions you may have now, or we can wait to the Q&A portion of the event.
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie. If you'd be willing to check in the chat, if there's anything that you can address there, but we should have a little bit of time at the end for Q&A in general, but if you want to take a look there, that'd be fine. So, what we're going to do now real quickly is, we have, that was great advice, by the way, across the board. I mean, I think a lot of what Stephanie had to say there, talks about what you could do in your classroom and different strategies to take and different mindset. That whole mindset thing is really super important. And one of the things that was striking when we put this program together was how much good teaching and learning practices, without even talking explicitly at DEI, really are what you need to be thinking about how to be more inclusive as a teacher. And so in the next short video, you're going to hear from Renee, Dimino, and Gena Merliss. If I can get the next slide. So Gena and Renee teach design and deliver inclusive courses. And so they recorded, again, a very short video, which I'll play now, about how they, the framework they use in that course to course design using DFINC's model of course design. So I'll shut up and just play that. I think I have to get out of here, go to here.
Hi, I'm Gena Merliss.
And I'm Renee Dimino, and we're both from Monroe Community College.
Our course, Design and Deliver Inclusive Courses, is grounded in the work of DFINC, who wrote Significant Learning Experiences. And a part of his model, which you can see on the screen, rests on using multiple types of course goals.
And so faculty are often most comfortable with foundational knowledge and application in terms of FINC's learning goals. These refer to the content that you're teaching and the skills you want students to develop.
So during our course, we encourage participants to take a larger view of learning goals to see how they might integrate the other areas represented by FINC. So instead of adding to what is sometimes very heavy course content, we encourage faculty to embed the ideas of caring, of metacognition, of connection within and throughout course content, especially in the design. And then in the classroom, this can show up even on the very first day of class.
So for example, as faculty think about creating an opening course or class activity, we lead our participants in our course through questions like this. And you can be thinking about these questions right now. So what are your course goals? How can an opening activity help you start to move your students towards those goals? How might you ask students about students' interests in a way that is connected to the course content? How can it give them a sense of the learning activities they will engage with throughout the course? How do they begin to think and act within your discipline's traditions right away?
And so here's an example from a past participant that taught a genomics class. And the class was a research class that involved taking sequenced genomic DNA from bacteriophages captured and isolated in the fall semester, and then analyzing the genetic content using bioinformatics techniques in the spring. So this opening activity was for the spring semester. And they spend that semester decoding DNA sequences. So he revised his opening activity so the students were broken into small groups of 3 or 4, and then they were asked to develop individual code names for themselves. The only constraint was that all of the code names were somehow relevant to the person. They were encouraged to be totally ridiculous, and that all the names in the group started with the same letter. So the activity was really open-ended, and it allowed students to choose what they decided to share about themselves, which is important. And it allowed everybody in the group a chance to be creative with each other around the topic that was relevant to the course. And there was a lot of laughter. And then they moved from the icebreaker into a basic description of the types of genetic coding that they would be doing throughout the semester. All of this on the first day.
So as this example shows, participants can do really cool and creative things in their courses to be more inclusive. And our course is built on allowing participants to apply their learning to their classes immediately, and then talk to each other about the teaching and learning process in an effort to make our courses more inclusive.
Hi, I'm Gena Merliss.
And I'm Renee Dimino, and we're both from Monroe.
All right, sorry about that. Okay, so I think what you saw from Gena and Renee's videos that, if you're looking to, there are different ways you can go about being more inclusive. I think, the approach they go in their course is kind of looking at it from that, what are your course goals? And then trying to build on those as you design the course. So if you're looking to design a new course or redesign a course you have been teaching, this might be an interesting a course for you to take within the DEI certificate program. All right, so speaking of design, the other thing that's really important to think about when you're designing a course is accessibility. And so our next live speaker here today who teaches for the program is David Wolf from Schenectady Community College. So, Dave, you have the floor.
Thank you. I'm the teaching learning specialist. I'm currently working at SUNY Schenectady. I've actually been working in the field of human problem solving and learning for about 30 years now. It was kind of humbling that I realized that I feel like it should be better. And the course that I teach is applying universal design for learning principles to your course. In many ways that can apply to face-to-face or online. And the one thing that I'd like to point out is that many times people view that as just making course material accessible, but actually the theory of universal design for learning is a lot more rich than that. It's about making courses inclusive to all styles of learning, and really to adopt practices that sort of scaffold the course to make sure everyone manages to succeed in a course. And I think that's something that's often overlooked. Naturally, we want our courses to be accessible or AD compliant, because you really cannot be inclusive if it's the case that you will not meet the minimum quality by law for your course, right? But instead, we want to make our courses so much more. And that's pretty much the present idea of the course. Let's see, can we move to the next slide? Here we are. And well, we could probably power through. Here we go. I'm going to give 6 examples. One is really just a practice, and the next 5 are more about the actual design, because a lot of times we can address certain issues and structural issues about inclusion by how we design a course. A lot of people don't realize that. We often make assumptions, implicit assumptions even, about how courses should be designed, often because that's the way they've always been designed. But we don't realize that in their design, they are actually benefiting certain types of learners and certain groups of people over others. I particularly mention that I was diagnosed dyslexic most of my life. I did not let anyone know this until a news reporter actually put it in an article unbeknownst to me. So now I'm open about it. In many ways, that held me back because I could not read fast enough to get high enough scores on SATs. I was denied many scholarships. And most people don't realize the fact that I cannot go through large bodies of text at a very fast speed really is no measure of my capability of how I can process things. I process things through different means. And actually, I managed to get through most of my education and degrees by finding alternate ways of organizing content to accommodate what well, some people call it disability. I call it a different way of learning. So the first thing I'd like to go through, and we go to the next slide, is something that everyone should consider to do anyway. And I call that the optional introduction or the icebreaker introduction. We already mentioned it. By having for example, if you have an asynchronous course, Many people find these courses sort of cold, and it might be new to them, and they're not sure what it means to be asynchronously online. But even if you teach a face-to-face class, if you hold a synchronous session outside of class so that it's an optional feature, it's a way that you can introduce yourself and the students can introduce themselves to each other. A lot of times that sort of breaks down barriers and they learn about each other. It's also a great opportunity for you to introduce an inclusive policy to let students know that it's a safe place for them and that you're willing to accommodate what they need. It's also a great place to show how to navigate online material, because while there are students who feel comfortable, there are going to be others who are new to education or online learning that will give them issues. Even if it's a course that you do face-to-face, if you have online material, giving them that first couple minutes is a great opportunity in that icebreaker discussion. Make it an hour. You can record the first half an hour of it for everyone to access. And then the other one I like to not record and let them know that they can ask any question and leave it open. And that way you can also sort of pivot your course at that moment at the beginning to accommodate the needs of those students. If you all of a sudden know that they have certain needs or desires, you can accommodate them and move the course to best suit them. And I call that the synchronous session 0 of your course, right? You should do that right up front so that you know the direction of your course so that you can effectively best serve your students, or the learners in this case, as many of our students in the program are actually academics and administrators. The next slide, here's the second one. Thank you. One of the features about Universal Design for Learning, particularly the principal representation, is to offer content in multiple presentations, giving students options of how they can access the content is very important. So that even though there's the option to be able to read the text, every one of our content sections in the course has its own section where there are video and audio versions, so that if students want, they can download playlists, they can watch a visual presentation of it, or they could listen to it on their iPhone, or they can read it. It really basically is, how do they want to learn? Here at the college, I know that we have several faculty who are very interested in learning little micro lessons, but they don't want the video. They want to just see the text they can quickly read and copy, and they like lots of hyperlinks to resources. Others, they love the videos. They want, they don't care about, they don't have time to watch. What you want to do is offer it in multiple options, and this takes time. So if you have stable content that is going to be with your course for a while, you really want to consider making short video to go with that and give them the option to download. Several new learning management systems have the option that you can click and have it read to you, but it doesn't give a visual presentation as well. It's always a great opportunity if you have a graphics department or a music department to work with students. They get the opportunity to build a script that probably you give them a script. The students sometimes like to put together a script. Sometimes, if you notice some of the playlists, if you go to my YouTube channel, you'll notice that it's not my voice. Thank God, because I don't like it. What we do is we find several of the music students, they do the voiceover, and they're so thrilled about it because on their resume, they can now say they have experience doing voiceover for video. So it helps them, it gives them new experience, and it gives us free voiceover. So if you take advantage of the fact that you have students who are perfectly happy to help you create this type of content, you can do the same. And that's just one way of accommodating the multiple learning styles, is giving them different ways of accessing the content. Likewise, you have options for how they want to present their own assignment types. They get to choose how do they want to present the material. Do they want to give a paper? Do they want a presentation? Do they want an auditory? Let them work with you to meet the learning outcomes, but let them do what they feel most comfortable with. And you'll find that every time the course is interesting and unique that way. All right. Also, they get to apply the content to their own interests. The third one is what I call a threaded assignment. A lot of times when we have large assignments, we do not allow the students to be able to reflect on the material, and we don't offer them the scaffolds necessary to help develop the assignment. So throughout the entire course, at least this course, we take aspects of the theory of Universal Design for Learning, and we apply them to your own course. And you're basically going to create these applications. You're going to showcase them to each of the members of the course, and all the learners get to review them, give their output and feedback. So they all sort of like work together collaboratively. But throughout the course, then you have these little scaffold marks. If you notice, there's like, you know, little visual cues of how far you are ahead. These sort of offer some sort of processing visualization so that the learners know where they stand, but they also act as these sort of little scaffolds. So they keep them propped up. They know how it relates back to the previous content. And it also allows them to be more familiar with the content and its relations. Okay. It also offers opportunities to revisit the key ideas and linkages between the ideas. And I can move forward because I'm on a 10-minute schedule. Checklists is something that's also applied. I'm a strong believer that if I actually suggest that everyone should do it because of a theory, the course also does it. So every one of these things is within the course as well. I would not be a hypocrite in my own instructional paradigm. So we create checklists. For the most part, they're printable. They get a physical. Faculty or students or learners, however, whoever takes a course can download them, utilize them, and really allow them to develop completion strategies. So no one falls through the gaps. There's always those students who will fall through the gaps. And one of the fun things we have that we discuss, because there's always a student who says, well, I have a sick child, this is going on in my life, and we're very open about that. We're very accommodating about that, and everyone understands that. But the interesting thing that many learners realize as they go through the course is that since 1 in 3 college students in the US today have children, many of the exact experiences and busy factors that interfere with them taking the course and make them fall behind are the exact same things that students are facing today. So once they sort of get that, they have that realization that when they're designing a course, some of the things that they're going through right now as a student in this course are the exact experiences that people are going through. So that if we can create these sort of tools to keep them on task and help them, it helps them personally, well, it helps the students. The next one. Number 5. How am I doing on time? Okay, I drank a lot of coffee, so I'm talking fast. Forgive me on that one. One of the key features of Universal Design for Learning is to have multiple representations to promote understanding. Because while one person may need a visual representation, another one might need a representation where they kinetically do things and they see how it relates. Others learn by communicating the concepts. So instead of just thinking of it as here's a whole bunch of papers to read, we like to offer graphical organizations where these graphical organizers can organize the content and they can literally visually see how the content is related to each other, and find that very useful for people. Usually it accompanies, naturally, other forms like textual versions. We use Meyer's multimedia learning theories. So you'll realize that you put them together, people are more likely to actually retain the information. But we also have graphical representations of non-course content. For example, to the left, you'll see, instead of just telling the students or giving them a chart of how you're going to be graded and here are the percentages, you can graphically easily do so, graphically show the relationship of the percentages. And I find that particularly at our community college, a lot of times students don't really understand the weight of what 25% is. But if you can graphically show what 25% is in the pie chart, they realize that if they miss that assignment, that is a huge portion of what that assignment's about. And by seeing that in the front, it helps them sort of build up strategies. They realize where they need to focus early on, and it gives them, success strategies that will help. Let's see, moving to the next, and I promise this is the last one because I'd much rather answer questions. I just want to give you a teaser so that you definitely want to take the course and see what else is in there. But I'd rather answer the questions that you have. One of the things that I like to do, and I think it's true not just for this course, but often for any course I teach, is to effectively allow the students to reflect on inclusive strategies or inclusion. We do this throughout the course. We basically reflect on what does it mean to be inclusive, and what are some of the factors that may apply to the content that we're learning, and how does it apply? And it's a big favorite feature at the end also to sort of reflect on what they've learned and how it applies to inclusion and the topic as a whole. That's one of the things that many of the past alums, if you will, of the class do. All right, I think that's it for me. I think I did it under 10, so we're on to the next.
Thanks, Dave. I think what we're going to do now, actually, just pivot a bit, since there are only 9 minutes left in the hour. I wanted to make sure that we had time for questions. So, you know, if there is time, Eileen's video is about 6 minutes. So what I could do is I'll put in the chat the link to her Vimeo video. It's basically, she's talking about what she does in her class on innovative strategies to engage all students. So sort of she gives a little bit of an overview of what the course looks like in Blackboard, and you know, some of the assignments that she has the students in that course do. So what I'll go ahead and do now is put the link to that video in the chat, so you can just grab it and check it out. Like I said, if we have some time at the end, maybe we'll play it for everybody. But if anybody would like, I believe you could turn on your mic or put a question in the chat. I did see there's a few, like Karen asked you, Dave, why you make the initial icebreaker session optional in your course.
Great, I can answer that faster by talking than typing. I was trying to type the answer. One of the reasons we make it optional is that it's a synchronous session. And when you have a course where you have people from across the country or possibly across the world, their time zones and other people have commitments. So sometimes they're not capable of making that session. So that's why you can offer the recording. And some people, they're a little hesitant to actually show their face. You never really know when someone takes an asynchronous course. In particular, a lot of times people with disabilities who don't want people to know that. They can have a picture from their face up or something and you never see anything. You don't see the background or so. They like to keep that anonymity. So that's one of the reasons we always like to make something optional, just like showing yourself with a camera or background. I always make that optional because you never really know what the person's going through. Likewise, sometimes they don't have access. We as academics sometimes take for granted our internet access, but many times some of our students don't, and they have to use internet access elsewhere. It's very difficult to make certain times.
Thanks, Dave. I don't know, Stephanie, you probably had a chance to look through some of the comments and questions. Is there any you want to highlight? Or
I think the ones that were directed to me were related to sharing some of these resources, which I'm always happy to do. Definitely share the wealth there. So I put my email in the chat. Anybody who has any questions or just wants to see some sample rubrics or anything like that, feel free to let me know.
You had mentioned in your presentation, Stephanie, the idea of equitable assessment strategies. I'm actually currently on a FAC2 committee, the faculty access to computing technology, teaching and technology. And that task group is looking at assessment in the classroom-based assessment. And one of the subcommittees is social justice assessment. We presented at CIT last year. We're continuing to meet. So we've been trying to collect examples of, equitable assessment practices, things like ungrading you may be familiar with. And so if you want to reach out to me if you're interested in that, the work that group is doing, shoot me an email. There is a website, if I have a second, I'll try to put in the chat as well, that's sort of collecting the practices for all of the folks we've reached out to throughout SUNY related to assessment in general, but there is a subsection of the website that deals with our subcommittee's work. So you could find some practical examples there if you're interested.
That sounds great. We have an English faculty member who our professional development just supported her participation in a training, and she's really excited to launch this next semester.
Anybody want to open up their mic for a question? Again, we have some time left.
I will say something. I'm looking at Dave Wolf's YouTube, and all the videos are 3 minutes and short. I've been making 20-minute, an hour video. Am I doing it wrong? Should I jump on this bandwagon of 3 minutes?
Let's see. I never like to say people are doing it wrong, but I say you can be more effective. In general, there's lots of things to know about video and watching video in particular. What happens is that there's certain drops. Most people don't realize that 50% of people watching a video leave within the first minute. And with instructional video, they found that the 6-minute mark is actually, you can make a video that's 30 minutes or 6 minutes. And the mean time for people watching will be 6 minutes, right? So if you can keep a lot of messages under 6 minutes and front load the first minute of what you're going to learn in that time, and then review it, that's usually more effective. It's just sort of a short video has a lot of punch to it, if you will. You'll notice that you can create playlists. So if you want to have a long list, for example, if you want to have like a 30-minute or 40-minute video, you could also break that 40-minute video up. Try to think of it as a bunch of playlists of maybe, 7 or 8 shorter videos that people can then jump to, and you'll have more effect, if you will, on some of the learners who have a shorter attention span.
Okay, and I thank the folks that put some links in the comments to get me on board. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, Jacob, you have your hand up?
Yeah, hi there. I'm curious what response folks might give to the argument, legitimate or otherwise, that doing things like not cold calling on people or offering, say, video content of what would otherwise maybe be a text is maybe a strategy that could that is disadvantageous in some ways to students, because it's not teaching them skills that could be difficult to learn and may be valuable in different aspects of their life. So, I mean, I'm not necessarily saying that I have my egg in either basket in that argument, but I think that it's an argument that I've heard made in reference to, say, video length in course design, and having a faculty maybe say, well, attention span, that's not really an issue for me. They should just learn to deal with it. So I'd be interested to see what responses there may be to that sort of argument.
I think I'll start by answering the cold calling piece of that, which is I've done it and it's been really unsuccessful. And so we sit there in awkward silence, not uncomfortable silence, awkward silence, because folks are taking a minute to process what I'm saying. Now they're trying to connect it. Now they're trying to remember things. Or the flip side of that, which is I have students who have accommodations that read in such a way that I can't expect them to produce even like a handwritten assignment in the classroom. So it's easier for me to redirect, put folks into small groups where they feel more comfortable, and then having the large group report out. It just gives them time to process. And I think for my experience, it makes the teaching more meaningful, and fewer people leave feeling frustrated or like they didn't get something out of the 3 hours we were together. I'll offer that for the first part of your question.
I'll follow up on the second. How's that? There's a lot of research that suggests that offering multiple forms of representation is more effective for student success. So if some instructor wants to say, well, I've always done it where students should really read 400 pages of 2-point font, and if they don't like it, that's just a problem of the student. Well, that's really just belligerence, right? It kind of reminds me of the people who say, my parents beat me and I came out okay. And my answer is, I'm not sure if they did. Maybe we could raise the bar, right? So in that sense, I really think we need to look at, there's research that demonstrates that that's just incorrect. In particular, you could say that understanding text is important to reading. For example, if I have a course on Russian literature, yes, you might need to be able to read the Brothers Karamazov, right? But even when you do read the Brothers Karamazov, having notes on the side to augment the book helps you understand, right? When you realize that in Russia, people have 4 different names that they go back and forth, and you realize there aren't 400 characters in this book. It's 1/4 that, right? The book makes sense to you. Right now, you could say I'm cheating by giving people that notes in advance, right? But am I? Or am I just being a good educator by pointing people in the right direction so that they can learn on their own? And in that sense, I've often heard that, I mean, when I first started doing instructional design, people always said, you know, every time you make an online course, it looks pretty. And I always thought it was funny. It's like, it doesn't look pretty. I'm using graphic design and research to make it more effective. You can process the information faster when you see it. There's research that shows that using bullet points is better than using large swaths of text. Right? So it's the same sort of thing. We're not really just making it easier for the student. We're utilizing theories of learning that apply to most all humans. So by giving these options, we're just utilizing best practices in education.
Thank you so much for that. The data point is really valuable, you know, in terms of disassembling that argument. So thank you.
So we are out of time. I just want to thank both of our presenters that are here today and the ones that created the videos, and as well, I did put the link to Eileen's video again in the chat. So I encourage you to check that out after we're done today. And I did also put the link to the program website. Like I said, registration's open right now for courses in the program that go through the summer. So feel free to sign up or send it along to colleagues. Kelly, will the chat be saved from the session today?
Yeah, it should be saved, and we can find a way to attach it.
Okay. And again, I apologize that there were the blocks on the screen earlier. It's just, I think sharing a Google slide deck sometimes screws things up, but
That's okay.
the recording will hopefully get rid of that.
Yep, I'm going to stop that right now.